just gonna put my foot on the floor and I'm not listening till I see God or a checkered flag.
Hello, and welcome back to Racing Thoughts, an IndyCar podcast. I'm Megan Dennis.
And I'm Meg Taylor.
And we are back post-Detroit. I guess we're going to talk about Detroit a little bit, but, really kind of delve into everything. I do want to start off by saying I cut it from the previous episode and was real annoyed, but it's because the episode dropped after Detroit because I didn't get it out on time. I was right. I was right, and there's no proof that I was right, but I was right.
What were you right about specifically?
I called Kyle Kirkwood winning Detroit and being the reason Alex Palou would not dominate. And that something would happen with Louis Foster. He was my one to watch. I did not want it to be what we saw by any means. I'm sorry, Louis. I feel like I owe you an apology. Never my goal. I wanted you to do something great. And it was really great until your car decided it wasn't really great.
Yeah, it had absolutely nothing to do with Louis as a driver. So we'll throw that out there. Just unfortunate. Sorry, Louis.
Yes. Yeah. But I guess before we really I don't know. I guess we can tackle this in any area we want to go in because it does all kind of relate to Detroit. And also there's less rules now with this podcast.
I mean,
we still can't jump fences. Can't jump a fence.
Yeah, that's the singular rule. Oh man, I should have put that in our TikTok.
Speaking of that, if you're not following us on TikTok, Racing Thoughts Podcast, go do so. Meg is, really manning that ship real well, and it's real funny.
Basically, our TikTok now is just me thinking I'm funny, and maybe 300 people are also like, oh, okay. So feel free to give us a follow over there.
Meg, where do you want to
jump
start?
right in?
Where do you want to start?
I feel like we should probably, why don't we talk about viewership first? Because I feel like the other stuff kind of ties into a little bit more about what Detroit is all about. So I feel like we should talk about the numbers first and then talk about the tea.
Okay, so I guess a few different things to talk about with Detroit viewership. I said last episode it'd be interesting to come back and see how this compares to. We knew we weren't getting the 500 numbers, but what was going to be the drop off? How does this kind of compare to what we have seen with other races throughout this season? And I'll go ahead and lead in with I think it's disappointing on what we saw. There's highs and lows of this. So it was a little over 1 million viewers for the Detroit GP, which is up 75% from 2024, which is exciting. That's wonderful. That is really good news. But you have to consider last year was on USA Network, which is a cable channel that you may or may not have access to, versus this year it was on Fox, which is part of that big draw is we're being on one of the prime networks that everyone, even with analog, basic access, is supposed to have access to. So yes, we were up 75% of viewers from this time last year, but that's taken into account as where it is. It is the most watched Detroit since 2021, which I guess is a good thing, but also, I don't know, I'd have to look into more on about the Detroit GP in general to compare that one. So this, I think, is an interesting number, is that through the first 7 races of the season, IndyCar on Fox is averaging almost 2.2 viewers, which is up 31% from 2024. Again, that's a good thing, but you have to also take into account the move from NBC's network of families versus to all races airing on Fox, which I do think is a big thing to keep into account. So yes, we're having that growth, but at what cost? I think it's one where, so peak of the 500 was 8.4 million viewers, averaged, a little over 7 million. I said this last week and I'm going to echo it again. Fox missed the mark here. We are again seeing with these numbers the notion that okay, the races that they have really done heavy marketing for, St. Pete to start off the season, really big lead up to the season. We take a month break and we see big drop offs to thermal. We should not have seen this dramatic of a drop off between the 500 and a race that was the next weekend. There was always going to be a drop off. Don't get me wrong. We knew this. It is the 500 for a reason. But I think a lot of it goes into the fact that Fox did not at any point during the race say, here's a mid-roll shot of hey, next week we're in Detroit. These are the times that we're racing at. Here's some cool footage of Detroit. Hype up videos that they do before the races. So those videos, I mean, and I'm not in production. I don't know everything that goes on to that side. I'm not going to pretend to. That is not my wheelhouse at all. I can just tell you about PE equipment. That's what I do. But 6 million people at a race that was roughly at the same time and we didn't get, they're all gone. like that. It's just, I'm frustrated with Fox again. For all the stuff that they do good, they are not helping themselves in the same boat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to what we've talked about last season when it came to like the advertisement that NBC didn't do a very good job of. And that was a major criticism that we all had. Like, you and me personally, but also just like fans in general, is that there wasn't advertising, there wasn't a push. And I think I'm seeing this in like a little bit more of an optimistic sense, in the sense of like, oh, viewership has grown overall. But, I think they are not doing enough to capture the audience that is already there and to continue, because so many people just know about the 500 as the 500 and they don't really care about much else outside of that. Like, Detroit is a very interesting race to have right after the 500. So I feel like if people were interested, they could have carried over afterwards. Like you said, them not mentioning it at all during the broadcast or even have like a commercial promo type of thing, that is kind of where it missed the mark for me. They know that there's an audience here. We've seen it time and time again. It's, like you said, St. Pete, beginning of the season, there was a massive spike of viewership. The 500, massive spike of viewership. Then all of a sudden, it drops. Like, it's a little sad to see, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, they are still growing though.
I think it's hard to say whether, though, it's actual growth or if that's just the difference between them being on a national network.
Okay, but is that not growth anyways? Is growth not growth regardless of how it comes?
Yes,
Because you
but
put it
no.
on a national network, that's a lot more access that people have that they didn't necessarily have before.
And I think that's the kind of the trade-off point that I think we're saying the same thing, but it's kind of like what lens is kind of it looking through too,
Yes.
because it's like, yes, it may be more accessible, but then that should mean that those numbers are showing like quite a more significant drop. And I think from that like significant standpoint, it doesn't feel like it's a number of like significance. Like, yeah, they're saying 75%, but like, is it when you're talking about like the network comparison and like what would that number have already looked like of people who just maybe had Fox on? I don't know. I think we'll know more next year, quite honestly, because that'll be
Yeah.
truly the comparison point is like, what do
100%.
these numbers look in comparison from year to year for the same
Mhm.
races? I think if you look from having the biggest 500 viewership, since 2008, and it wasn't, special year for it to happen, to then have such a big, like, there didn't seem to be a bleed over. And I know, like I said, I'm not saying it should have been 7 million people. Like, it'd been nice, but we knew that wasn't realistic. But like, for it to be barely over a million in comparison, I feel like there was a missed mark in that bleed over effect that should have been able to happen. When, especially you take into account of like, and I don't know those numbers, I'm not going to pretend to, but like we had F1 in the morning, we had NASCAR that night, so there wasn't anything taking away from IndyCar viewership like we had kind of earlier in the season, and that box is like, oh, we need to fix it.
Yeah. I think a lot of that too also comes from the fact that you talk about NASCAR, you talk about F1. There is a lot of overlap between all three of them in terms of like the drivers themselves watching each other's races and things. But I think that is kind of like one of the biggest promoters almost for the 500 is like, how many times did the 500 get brought up during F1 at Monaco? I heard it so often. Like, I heard a handful of drivers talk about, well, I want to go watch the 500. Let's, wrap up media stuff. Like, there's that massive overlap between like the F1 and IndyCar McLaren team. You have all the Penskes with IndyCar and NASCAR and stuff. There's that bleed over and like that overlap that they have that I feel like there was a lot more conversation around with the 500 happening and not so much necessarily obviously with Detroit because, it's Detroit. But I don't know, missed the mark. It's a shame, but I would love to see more of the promo. The same criticism that I had of NBC last year was they just didn't do any promo. And I know Fox has it. They did a whole lot of media stuff before the season started. They have the commercials. I don't know why they're not using it.
Exactly. I mean, like, we say it all the time. We're not an F1 podcast, but I think that's something that they could take from F1 because at the end of every F1 race, Sky, ESPN coverage, whatever, always shows a preview of like, this is, next time, this is where we're
Mm-hmm.
going. And we know that they have that because we have the cut footage at the beginning of the IndyCar races for those. So I'm just like, again, I'm not in production. I don't know when those are getting done. I don't know what any of that looks like. I don't frankly want to know, but you're telling me we can't roll any of that stuff out? I don't know.
I think I mean like my question too, and this is gonna go like directly to Hinch and Will Buxton and Townsend Bell. Like, why are you not able to say anything about, oh, we're going racing here next, and like talk a little bit about it in the commentary booth? Is that just something that you don't think to do, or is it like you're not allowed to, or do you have to follow a certain script? Like, I know you do have to follow certain things, and like, there's bullet points that I'm sure that you have to hit, but like there were plenty of times during, the 500 and even during Detroit that they could have plugged the next race.
Say, and I agree with you, but they did do that for the next race, which is Gateway. Like I saw commercials for like Gateway for WeatherTech. Like,
Oh, so then I missed
for
those.
like those commercials were happening for like, hey, in 2 weeks, get your tickets now for the WeatherTech gate whatever. It's Gateway. I don't know what their
Yeah.
official name is. But like they were there and that was happening during the broadcast, which is like no, it's not that footage, which was what I would like to see. I mean, it was a little bit, but it was definitely a commercial, but like it was there and it's, I'm not near St. Louis. It's not like I'm in like that local viewership market to be able to have that being specifically done. So it's like I don't think it's that case. It's like, oh, they did that. And so then it comes down to like, okay, is this coming from the track promoters? Because we do know that like WeatherTech really did push to be able to get it. They have that 8 p.m. start time. Like they got that night change and it's going to be it's prime time. It's prime time IndyCar, which is huge. And I'm really, really excited for that race. I like Gateway in general. It's also my birthday weekend, but like there's a lot of things about that are like I like Gateway. And I know that WeatherTech Gateway people like I can't remember their promoter's name, but he has done a lot to make sure that like that promotion's getting done, that promotion's getting out. And so then it comes to a matter of like it can't all be on Fox either. Then so what are the GPs doing to make sure they're helping support it themselves? I don't know. This is not our wheelhouse. This is not our area to fix, but I think it just comes back to stuff we have talked about over and over and over. And that's why it's frustrating 7 races in to still be having the same conversation of like, why aren't we doing this better?
Yeah. So I think that kind of sums up our thoughts and views on viewership and stuff. And again, it's a lot of the same things that we've already been talking about. So we're not going to continue to talk about it right now.
So, guess what, Meg?
What?
Alex Palou didn't win.
He didn't even finish.
Yeah.
He full on DNF'd
Thanks
through no fault of his
to
own.
thanks
Through no
to
fault.
little Dave Malukas, who also was like it wasn't intentional,
Yes,
supposedly.
absolutely. But he also did take accountability afterwards. He was like, I messed up. My bad to Alex Palou and like the 10 team over there. So like props to him for that. But yeah, kind of crazy that Alex Palou didn't actually finish.
I mean, it really just shows that, like, yes, Alex Palou is this generational talent that we've really never seen in recent times in IndyCar. He is never going to be bigger than the 500 curse. Last 10 years, no 500 winner has won the next race. The closest was Takuma Sato, came in second, but, on average, it's like a 10.3 average finish for the last 10 years of the drivers who win the 500.
That 500 curse is real strong.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not you believe in the woo woo hippy dippy that's out there, you can't just disregard it. It's there, it's patterns. You can't fight it. It's unfortunate, but with that being said, he does not DNF often. I mean, last time that he didn't finish a race was last year at Iowa, like during one of the doubleheader races. And even then, that was like, oh my God, that was such a big deal because he never DNFs basically. So that was wild. Me and my dad were like jaw unhinged on the floor, like, oh my God. But that made it entertaining.
Well, fact about it, he didn't qualify well to begin with, and
No.
he really wasn't ever in a fight for the lead of the race. I cut it from last episode, so I guess I can't circle back to what I previously said. But for as much as I hate Detroit, and I'm standing on that hill that I hate Detroit as a racetrack, I think it's awful, terrible, horrible, no nonsense, full nonsense, lied, full nonsense racetrack. It was actually a really good race.
I like Detroit for the chaos that it can bring. And I said this last episode. I like Detroit for the chaos that it brings, but I don't like Detroit for how unsafe it is. And I think that was really, really apparent in this race. And I hate the fact that we have Belle Isle, which is an incredible track. I love Belle Isle. I think it is beautiful. It's a fun track to look at and to watch. The drivers really like it. Fans really like it. I understand why they are putting the Detroit GP in downtown Detroit. It is Chevy's home race. They want it to be throughout the city. I get it. But at the risk of driver safety, and I said this last episode, it shouldn't be at the risk of driver safety. And we saw that. I mean, kind of skipping past the Alex Palou of it all, after that, we had a big crash from Louis Foster and Felix Rosenquist. And the crash that happened with Louis Foster, it was completely car broke down. His front suspension just broke. And he did not have control over it. And, he rammed into the back of Fro. They both went into the tire barriers. It was a gnarly crash. Not good, and Felix ended up having to be taken out on stretcher. He has this massive brace. He says he's fine. Emil says he's fine. But it's scary. Thankfully Louis Foster is also okay. He got out on his own volition, but it was Felix who was, struggling. He didn't really get out on his own volition. And then he sat on his tires waiting for, the ambulance and the stretcher to come out because he said he was in pain. And I don't understand how we have the technology and we have the safer barrier. And that has been proven time and time again to help reduce the risk of these types of injuries. I don't get why it's not being used. I really don't get it.
Can't answer that. But I just in general, Detroit was a very unsafe race because
it's bumpy.
It's bumpy. The track, it's bad. It is
It's bad.
street circuit. Most of our street circuits are bad, honestly, outside of Long Beach. But above that, it's okay. You have Louis' front suspensions fail, and you have Townsend Bell on the broadcast saying he has not seen anything happen like that since James Hinchcliffe's 2015 crash. Which, if you're not familiar with that, that was.
Don't go and watch it.
Don't go and watch it. But when I say we are genuinely lucky that James Hinchcliffe is alive, I am not being over dramatic there. The reality is that with his front suspension fail, James Hinchcliffe should not be with us anymore. Thank God he is, and thank God for everything that happened with the safety team and everything that went into place to make that be the case. But the fact that Townsend said that and that was 2015, in a decade we have not seen anything that bad. He's really scary. And then on top of that, it's funny. It's objectively funny to see a tire just kind of rolling down the track on its own. But there's a problem when we had that happen to two cars. So Devlin lost one of his tires. He was luckily able to kind of limp back in. And then Callum lost one of his when he crashed as well. And it's just that's also a problem. What's going on with the tires then that they're just losing them all willy-nilly then goes back to what's happening with tech inspections. Something's not right here.
Yeah, but to play the flip side of that, is that the fault of the track? Is that the fault of tech inspection, or is that the fault of the teams and the crew who are putting on the tires? I don't know the answer to that. I think honestly it might have come down to, at least in Devlin's case, that just looked like the crew didn't do a very good job of putting the tire on. I remember last year, I think Colton had a tire that ran loose somewhere, and that was just tire ran loose because the pit crew didn't do a very good job of securing the tire. Is that the same case here? Maybe, but I think it was exacerbated by the fact that it was an incredibly bumpy street track. So you have a normal maybe road course or even on an oval, you could maybe get away with not necessarily tightening it all the way, or there might be a little bit of a wiggle room there, but in a place like Detroit, that, the bouncing and the bumping and the divots that happen because it is in fact a street course that runs through the streets of Detroit, it's going to be, like I said, exacerbated. So I love street courses personally. And this is in any racing series personally. I think they're fun. I think it gives a really good look at, the surrounding communities. I think it boosts a lot of things. However, I do think that street courses need to have maybe a different set of specifications for them to make it safer. So, like, if you're running on the streets need to be smooth and paved. Like, those types of things should be avoidable. The streets and the bumps and, the potholes and those types of things that make it unsafe should be avoidable. And if you're going to put a street track through on the calendar, there needs to be, I think, different specifications in order to make it so that it's safe enough. Because again, I do love street courses and I think they're fun, but I think they need to have those, rules a little bit. I don't know.
We're not privy to why those tires came off. I think it's just weird that it happened twice. But yeah, no, I'm not like I said, it's who's at fault? I don't know. I don't know if we can put anyone at, I guess somebody might be to blame. It might just be the streets of Detroit. I don't know. But it's just, again, goes back to why I don't like Detroit and I don't particularly like street races in general, is that I feel like they're typically a lot more unsafe. And I'm not here for that. And I mean, it's racing. It all comes with its level of unsafe. But what was it, Mid-Ohio last year that had that awful bump on the road? And that's a road course, so, like, it
Yeah.
happens. I
It's
don't
not
know.
just specific to street courses, but I feel like we have this conversation a lot
Well, it
more
was
when it comes
Nashville.
to street
It was
courses.
Nashville that had that.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
the
Nashville
concrete
also
race.
had, yeah, Nashville also has like the concrete versus, the other.
Asphalt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a whole other, conversation in terms of safety and things. Because, all right. So that
Well,
kind of is our spiel with that sort of stuff. I mean,
with that, though,
not,
buckle up for 3 more years of it because we are in Detroit for the next 3 years. They've extended that contract. Am I shocked? No. Do I like it? Also, no. Meh.
meh. But again, I understand it's Chevy's home race, but then we have Hondas who are continuing to win in Chevy's
3 years
hometown.
straight.
Yep.
And with that, the podium ended up being 2 out of 3 were
Yeah.
Hondas. I mean, 2 of them are Andretti, so I guess that kind of makes sense, but same thing still applies there.
And, speaking of Andretti, I think they had a massive comeback, obviously post 500. And I think that was really exciting for me to watch. One, because I love the Andretti boys. I think they're fantastic. And, we have talked time and time again about how much we like them and how much we support them. But, it was really, really fun to watch Kyle specifically just absolutely crush it the entire weekend. He had a little, hiccup during quali, which prevented him from getting pole. However, Colton Herta did get pole, which was awesome. But Kyle ran a phenomenal race. And, one of my favorite things that he said post race was, it was definitely not easy for him in terms of strategy, but I really liked that because it did look easy from like an outside perspective, just how dominant he was the whole weekend. From practices to quali to then the entire race, he did make it look easy, despite the fact that he was like, no, it absolutely wasn't. And I'm
With a
like,
broken front wing, nonetheless, during the race, too.
Yep, with the broken front wing, which I know I talked about it with you, but I thought it was really funny that my dad was like, get that car into a wind tunnel and see if that actually made a difference in his downforce and like the aerodynamics and made it a better car. I'm like, yeah, Dad, you're so right.
Oh, and I guess speaking of Kyle Kirkwood, I didn't make a note of it, but like, what did the actual bleep was Will Power doing
Will Plower.
this weekend? What was he? What was that?
What was he
that?
on? Because he was giggling about it.
And then his interview, sitting there giggling. He thought it was so funny. I guess some context if you didn't see, Will literally drove his car. Was it Friday's practice? Yeah, it was Friday's
Yeah, it was
practice.
Friday.
He drove his car, Kyle Kirkwood, and like he was driving real mad. I don't know why Will Power was so mad, but he was real mad. And like didn't have a gap because Kyle was going slow. He's getting ready to take his lap. David Lucas was alongside him, so Will Power didn't have a gap. He just pushes Kyle Kirkwood out of the way, and it's just kind of like. And then they ask him about it. He never really gave an answer. He's just
No.
sitting there giggling, and it's just like, what is wrong with you?
Listen, these race car drivers we know don't necessarily have, the best mental space sometimes. They're crazy. They go several hundred miles an hour. They're insane. So, of course, Will Power is going to be like, tee my bad.
Will Power, you can come on the podcast anytime you want.
I have questions.
I just want to hang out. Last thing, I guess, to touch on would be the second place winner of Detroit is Santino Ferrucci. Yeah, but that's all I have to say about where he placed.
I think he got lucky with the caution at the end.
Oh, 100%. And then the red flag, too.
Yeah, he would not have placed where he did if it wasn't for that.
And I think if Colton and Will hadn't been having to battle each other as much, it would have been probably an Andretti 1-2 with Will Power at behind, or possibly even Will Power in second. Or, if Dog had a chance. Shout out to Kiffin Simpson. He finished.
So true.
Good job, kiddo.
Yeah.
And your teammates are Scott Dixon and Alex Palou, and you finished the highest out of all three. Good job, Kiff. We are very proud of you.
Love to see it.
But with that, Santino did fail post-race inspection, stuff related to weight and being underweight, but the car was overweight, and I don't care to read the rules. Meg, if you want to, you can take it. I don't really care that much. He, however, wasn't stripped of his finish.
Yeah, so basically the rule, it's about the driver weight. So it was Rule 14.4.2.2 and Rule 14.4.2.5. So it's basically, the drivers have to weigh themselves after their race, and the car also gets weighed, and there's like a window that they are allowed to be in. And he did not meet those two rules, obviously. But the thing that I was looking for that I really couldn't find an answer to, unfortunately, literally, I have read the rule book so many times and have tried to find it. Basically, the only thing that I can really come up with in terms of like what the penalty is, it says violation of this rule may result in a minimum fine and or other penalties. And that's basically all that we have. So I know, at least in my online spaces, a lot of people were not super happy that he failed the post-race tech inspection and then wasn't stripped of his P2 position. There isn't any really rule that determines that if you fail your post-race inspection, you get stripped of your finishing place. So they can't really do that, even if they think that was like the right call. There isn't a precedent for it. There isn't a rule. There isn't like a technicality, at least that I am aware of. So if anyone out there is listening and they are aware of that, please send that my way so that I can have that in my back pocket. But from what I can find, like going through all 106 pages of the IndyCar rulebook, there's nothing that says that the entrant gets stripped of its finishing position. So it is what it is.
Exactly. Also, speaking of the rulebook, I went back from when I was editing our last episode, and we were talking about the jump test. I'm sure there are guidelines on it, but it is not specifically laid out in the rulebook, other than they have 8 seconds to be able to get out of the car. Everything is deemed to, it's like up to IndyCar, like officials on what the safety whatever looks like. So I guess we got to ask an IndyCar medical safety person. If anyone from the safety team wants to come on the podcast, you can gladly come whenever. Dr. Julia, you're welcome on the podcast whenever you want.
We have so many questions, and I also just want to learn from you. So yeah, that's really kind of the big news that happened after Detroit. And then I guess we're now kind of circling into McLaren and the things that have been going on that we have seen online between TK and some other friends.
Yeah. And I guess this does kind of act as a follow-up from the conversations we had at the end of last episode to an extent.
Yeah.
As well from Pato's post-race comments and everything that came out of that. Background, Nolan Siegel got hit by Scott McLaughlin during Detroit. It took him from having like a pretty good race. I think he was in like maybe 9th 10th, somewhere there, to it dropped him to dead last in the field. With that one, IndyCar on Fox tweeted out the video. Scott McLaughlin tweeted, misjudged this one. Old mate broke quite a bit earlier than I anticipated. Good to see McLaren team principals are still on the hunt for beef. At Good Ranchers has loads for you. Use code #break later for 0% off. Now, this comes from comments that Tony Kanaan, TK, who is team principal of Arrow McLaren for this year, had made, basically like just essentially like saying, this is all on like Scott not knowing how to drive correctly, blah, blah, blah. I don't have TK's exact comments that he made there, but that's essentially the gist of it. So Scott said this. He even owns up to the fact. He said, I misjudged this one. Like, he took ownership to the fact of like, yeah, he hit Nolan, but it's because Nolan, who is still a rookie driver, even though he's not technically classified as a rookie this year, he is a rookie driver still. This is his first full season. Didn't, from Scott's perspective, did not carry out the racing as Scott would have expected. Tony Kanaan then tweeted, and this is where things start getting messy, in my opinion. Tony tweeted, misjudged last week, misjudged this week. At least you get a weekend off to square that away. I came looking for your team principal to have a chat, but I couldn't find him. Wait. And then Scott tweeted at him, he went, our team principals aren't usually on Twitter during the race, but you've got my phone number, mate, with the like crying, laughing emoji. So that's that. But then it's also, you have one where, or someone tweeted at Tony, just a random fan, said, little bro at Tony Kanaan, stop crying. You made countless mistakes. You're embarrassing yourself. And then Tony said, come visit the baby Borg and the championship trophy when you can. I personally have more issues, and we can touch on all of it. I have more issues with Tony said to a fan than I do with what he had to say with Scott. But my general opinion on the matter in whole is that, like, should Scott have said what he said? Maybe, maybe not, but we're used to our IndyCar drivers doing stuff like that. Do I think Tony Kanaan, in the role that he has as team principal, should be saying what he's saying? No, and I think it's a really, really bad look for McLaren and just kind of digging in a very kind of like almost tasteless way, I think, with what he's saying.
I think it's entertaining as I mean, no, I agree with you in the sense that if TK was still, not in the role of being the team principal, I think it would have been, fine. Because, like you said, we are kind of used to seeing our drivers doing this sort of thing. And I think that also kind of goes back to what we were saying about Pato last week and his comments that he made after the 500. Should he have said that? Probably not. In the same way that should Scott have said that? No, probably not. But they're IndyCar drivers. They have access to their socials. They run their social media accounts, which is one of my favorite things about, this series is, it does feel like we have a different level of access to these drivers that F1 doesn't have. And I think that leads itself to showing that these drivers are in fact human. They do let their emotions get the best of them. And I think that can sometimes be kind of funny. If we're going to be judging bad taste about reacting to things, we could say the same thing to Scotty when he got in Devlin DeFrancesco's face. Should he have done that? Probably not. Was it entertaining as Absolutely it was. Did I eat it up? Yes, I did. The same way that I think this kind of drama is also delicious. I think it goes back to what I have seen online again in my social spaces where people are like, oh, bring back the cattiness, bring back the petty, bring back the drama of it. Like when you're comparing early 2000s, even like 90s and 80s type of motorsport, like the drivers that were there, the drama that kind of surrounded them was kind of funny, looking back on it in hindsight. Sure, I think it's pretty funny, some of the stuff that they did and some of some of the things that they said. And I think this is going to kind of come into, well, what do we expect of these drivers? Do we want them to be more truthful and honest to themselves, but then kind of show the world that, hey, they're human and they make mistakes and they sometimes misstep and say the wrong thing? I personally am more inclined to be following that versus, the thing that I really dislike about F1 right now is that so many of the drivers are like perfect little PR people and, you don't get personalities. You don't get to know them a little bit. And, I think that having Twitter beef is sometimes pretty funny and it, allows us to come in to their world a little bit. I don't know. I know that is probably not a very common take and maybe not necessarily a popular one, but I think it's entertaining because I don't take it too seriously. But again, I can say that from an outside perspective of also, I don't really care. Have beef with each other if you want. Just don't let it run into, oh, I'm going to run you off track type of stuff. That's when it gets dicey for me, which we haven't seen.
Well, we did last year. If you take the stuff that happened with Roman Grosjean and Santino Ferrucci, we have seen that happen on track. We have seen it
Yeah.
carry over.
Yeah.
I again, it goes back to differentiating opinions. We had this last week when we talked about, what Pato's saying post, 500, saying it's a boring race, saying Ericsson choked. Do I objectively think when the drivers get kind of like, I don't know, catty, like with each other, I guess, like, do I think it's funny? Yes. Do I think it's entertaining? Absolutely. We wouldn't be talking about it if, there wasn't the sense of entertainment behind it. I think when it comes to what Tony Kanaan is saying, I think one, like, your team principal, it's a bad look. You are supposed to be in charge of the team. You need to, I hate to say be respectful of your position, but you do need to be respectful of your position. Two, I don't like that he essentially was kind of like Scotty for what happened in the 500 when, like, he's been in that case. He's raced that race so many times. He knows how much that race matters. And to just bring that up to bring it up, like, it's tacky in my honest
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
it had absolutely nothing to do with the incident on track in Detroit.
and then, like, just to go off on, like, a fan who's saying, like, hey, this is an embarrassing look, which, like, it is. At least in my opinion, I think it is. Like, it's just, I like, what we see behind the scenes of drivers' personal lives and their personalities. And I mean, there's a reason I listen to Connor Daly's podcast. There's a reason I listen to Off Track every week. Like, I watch Scott's vlogs, I watch Pato's vlogs. Like, I consume the media that they are giving us. Like, I like getting to see the behind the scenes and what is at least their trade image that they want us to be able to have access to. But I also think there's kind of a line that needs to between, like, how you're presenting yourself. And I personally am of the camp of I don't love how McLaren's been presenting themselves in the last 2 weeks. And I do same like Arrow McLaren as a whole because it is more than one person that's part of that camp. Because you also have Zach Brown, who was in Detroit this past weekend, saying that like he thinks that IndyCar drivers are too friendly with each other and he doesn't think that's a good like show for motor racing. Vastly disagree. I love that unlike, F1 where none of the drivers are actually friends. Oh, you may think no, they're not. At best, they're colleagues. At
Yeah.
best.
They're your work friends that you call just because you see them so frequently. They're not usually people that, they're hanging out with. I feel like you can maybe make the case for like Charles and Pierre or like Lando and Carlos, but like those are rare exceptions to the overall concept of like they're not really friends in F1. They're competitors.
And what I really like about IndyCar, and honestly, what I think has continued to draw me into the sport, is the fact that 100% they are competitors. But also, like, these dudes are legit friends.
Yeah.
And, like, I enjoy that. I enjoy that it's the stuff doesn't, well, it occasionally does, but for the most part, doesn't normally carry over off track, at least in a way of, like, how they interact with each other. And I don't know. I just, like I said, a lot of it's coming out of one team right now. So it happens to put a sour taste in my mouth towards one team when it's repeated members of one organization that are putting all of this out there right now.
Yeah. And I think this is also kind of piling on to where a lot of people have had a sour taste about Arrow in the past like year and a half. And this is something that we've talked about in the past. And, this is also coming from me who is like an Arrow McLaren fan. I understand why people have such a sour taste in their mouth at like this just feels like another drop into the lake of why people are upset. And like a lot of people are upset from how they handled things last season when, Dave Malukas was supposed to be in that number 6 car. And then it just turned into the rotating driver of who's going to be in that car. And then, Dave dropped. And then, it was supposed to be Theo Porcher. He got dropped before he even had the chance to. And then it was all of a sudden Nolan and
Callum for a second before he even didn't get his
Callum.
chance.
Yeah, Callum got brought into the conversation and then that was taken away drastically. So like and I think it also kind of goes back even further with how McLaren maybe treated Rossi during contract negotiations and how McLaren treated Fro when his contract was up and all of those
James
things.
Hinchcliffe too.
James Hinchcliffe with all of that kind of stuff. And the same with the Alex Palou drama. And there's just a lot that has come out surrounding McLaren and how they handle things. And like part of it to me, from what I have seen, and some of the criticisms as of right now, because we talked at length last week about, how Pato is kind of presenting himself and everything, and how that may be leaving a sour taste in some people's mouths as well. But there was a comment that TK had made, I think it was during the Indy Next race, where he was in the commentator booth and like whoever it was had asked TK, like, oh, how are the dynamics with your drivers? And he was like, well, they're not friends. Like they work well together in the sense of like, Christian wants to beat Pato. But then this is the comment that really stuck out to me. It was that TK said Pato thinks, or like people think that it's Pato's team. And like that feels weird to say, but it also feels like it's very mirrored of what McLaren F1 is doing right now with the conversation between like Lando versus Oscar and how people are saying like, oh, well, Oscar's the new kid that's coming up and is like outperforming the guy who's like, oh, this is his team. Like Oscar's outperforming Lando right now. Christian is outperforming Pato right now. So it feels like it's very mirrored. And I'm starting to see a lot of similarities between Lando hate and Pato hate right now of like, oh, it's entitlement. Oh, he feels like he deserves this because, he's been here the longest. And I do agree with some of that. But at the same time, you put your entire career in the hands of this team and you have stuck with it through all of the bad and got the brunt of the hate when it was bad to, oh, now they're doing pretty good. And now all of a sudden, the performance between teammates is changing the dynamic. And I do think that there should be some sort of, I don't want to say bias because that's not the right word, but like there should be some sort of respect for the driver who has been there longer and has put up performances more consistently. But I don't know.
Oh, see, I don't think I agree with that statement. And like, because that was TK's comment was like, well, it's Pato's team. He said it's Pato's team. We've seen it. It's been a carousel of drivers since McLaren took over and they ousted James Hinchcliffe for Pato Award. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we have only gotten kind of alluded to by Hinch, but that's the reality is they brought in Pato to replace Hinch. It started off with Oliver Askew and why he doesn't currently have a seat anywhere on the grid. Fro, Rossi, the carousel of the six, like everything that's happened there. And something that has been said time and time and time again when it comes to what is happening at McLaren is that the car is built for Pato, who all of his teammates he has had, even going back to Colton Herta, like when they drove together in Indy Lights, Indy Next, whichever it was called at the time, said that it's like the setup that Pato likes, nobody else like drives that way. It's just fine. That's his no one's faulting him for that. But the thing that like all the McLaren drivers have said is that like they all build the car around Pato. And now what we're finally seeing, and Pato has said it himself more than once this year, is that the car's not being built to his setup. And now he doesn't know what to do with it. And so it's just, I don't know, it almost feels like PK is talking out of both sides to an extent with this, saying, oh, it's Pato's team. But like they're clearly going in a different direction because they're finally realizing of it's like, well, if we want to really get everything we can't set everything that our direction of our team's going on one guy when we have three cars. So yes, is there a testament to Pato's loyalty and that should be, respected by the team 100%. And I'm not saying it's not, but I think it's both sides of it there that now we're seeing something, and I think it does kind of echo kind of what we've seen with F1 McLaren as well, of like they don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, you've kind of brought this upon yourself in a multitude of ways. And then instead of addressing it internally, I think we're almost seeing it addressed to externally.
Yeah. No, I agree with that part specifically. Like these issues and these things are problems that are causing significant issues for the team and they need to be addressed, but it needs to be addressed in not necessarily like the most public way, which is how it's being done right now. And I can understand why it leaves such a sour taste in people's mouth. Like, it's not a great look for them when you have your team principal going off and when you have like Zach Brown going off like that. But again, it just kind of, I don't know, I feel like it adds to the drama a little bit. And again, I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So I'm like, sure, pop off on Twitter, TK.
And I think that's something we know we're not going to see eye to eye on because I think
No,
it's a bad look.
absolutely.
I think it's a bad standpoint to be able to take. I think it's a bad look for the team. Or it's like you already know that people don't are starting to really not like y'all as a team.
Hmm.
Also, it's helping that image. It's not. Also, I don't know if I'll leave this in or not, but I also was thinking about it when I was editing it. I said we've seen the boy bandification of Pato Award. I think I've thought of a better comparison.
Oh,
He's kind of the Taylor Swift of IndyCar, right? In a fandom perspective standpoint. In the
okay.
sense of if you are a fan of Pato, you are a massive fan of Pato overall. But then if you're not, or even if you are, but maybe you don't agree with what's being put out there at the moment and you say it, you get a lot of backlash from the fandom space. And I think it's very similar to kind of what we see to people with Taylor Swift.
Interesting. I definitely see the comparison, but I also feel like that is very much like, again, it's the boy band effect. Because, I mean, how many times did, like a news outlet or another celebrity talk poorly about One Direction, and then all of a sudden, like that person was swarmed with backlash because of the One Direction fandom? Well, you have this massive fan base, and like you said, if you say anything that like negatively reflects upon that person, then it's just you are swarmed with backlash. And I can agree with that. It was crazy. I did see a video, like a TikTok earlier this week, where like it was a crowd around the McLaren motorhome in the paddock. And like that to me is insane. That's when we get into, oh, this is getting weird.
It's just I don't know, it's a weird space right now of like it's a sport, and I guess as someone who is like a sports person, very much a sports person in literally all facets of my life, the boy bandification, the fandomness around one person when it's a team sport, it is but it isn't. I don't, you know what I'm trying to say? I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know the words I'm looking for. Like it's a little weird to me, I'm not gonna lie. And I
Yeah.
think that's the point that like we're getting to the point of things are getting a little too much.
Yeah. And I think, like I remember being, 10, 11, same in like I remember meeting like Michael Phelps. And like granted, I was a swimmer growing up, so like he was my idol for majority of my childhood. And I met him and I was like freaking out. But, it wasn't because, oh my God, I thought Michael Phelps was so cute. Cause like I love you, Michael Phelps, but like, no.
Michael Phelps, you can come on the podcast anytime you want to.
Michael Phelps. Actually, no. Your mom, she gave a talk at my college because she was in the education space in Baltimore, and I like went to see one of her talks. This is absolutely completely unrelated to anything, but I loved her, and I was like, okay, so I go from having Michael Phelps as my childhood idol to, oh no, this is my adult idol, is his mother. Anyways, but like I remember meeting him and like freaking out because again he was my idol because I was in the same sport as him and like I was aspiring to be him despite the fact that there was no chance that that was ever going to happen. But, he was a sporting idol, whereas like now it's starting to get into, oh God, I'm going to sound like such an when I say this, and like the perception is that young fans are only fans because the drivers are cute, and that is like the worst thing that I feel is happening. And like it's the same in the space of F1. Like this is now a conversation specifically in F1 because you have fans who are stalking hotels and stalking their houses. And like that's the level that I fear that it's going to get to with the growth of the sport. So it's like I don't know where it goes from here, but like to quote Taylor Swift, I've seen this scene before.
Well, and I think the difference is, yeah, we've definitely seen this before, but that's in music spaces. And once that happens, there's a hiatus, they take a break, there's a pause. Fandoms age out, fandoms age up.
Yeah.
And we have actively been part of that. This isn't it,
No.
because it's not like there's no aging up of our motorsport. There's no, I mean, I guess, yes, drivers can take a hiatus, they can take a break, but they can retire, but that's a different conversation, and it should never be at the account of fandom. And this is, I don't know, this might mean that we're getting old, being able to be this like hypercritical of the spaces that we used to very much be part of. I think with it being a sport, I think that's the part that I keep getting maybe held up on, is that like it feels different to me. Like the world feels different to me. And so seeing that kind of almost be combined, like it's IndyCar and even F1 to an extent, but IndyCar is not big enough to hold this.
Yeah. 100%.
And I think it goes back to what I was saying last week of like what I don't want to see happen is that one driver, one team, or and this is not, Pato specifically, this goes to any of them. Like I don't want them to start seeing themselves or the fandom space to start treating them as bigger than the entity they are part of. Because at the end of the day, like, the race car drivers, they are athletes. Like they are just that's their goal, is to be at the pinnacle of whatever that looks like for success within their sport. And I think we're seeing a very weird blend right now that I'm a little worried about what that looks like. And I don't know that it's going to be bad. I really hope it's not,
Yeah.
but I fear it could be.
Yeah. I feel like this is then turning into more of a criticism of fandom spaces because, again, you have mentioned it. We have been in fandom spaces for a long time and we have been a part of multiple fandom spaces. And this is just a general shift that I feel like has happened within fandom spaces across a lot of different genres, I guess. Like, I've seen going back to as early as, oh, this is going to be a real throwback, but like Dream Street, like you remember Dream
I
Street?
do. I just know you were like, I was like, yeah, no, we are old.
We are old, guys. Dream Street was my OG fandom space, okay? But then it like went into sports. Again, also very much a sports girly, always have been, always will be, and across multiple different types of sports. Like I was a swimmer, I did lacrosse, I did volleyball, but then, the sports that I watched, I was a big football fan. I still am, obviously. Tom Brady, hello. But like I'm a big soccer fan. You got me into tennis, and like a lot of different sports do almost have the boy bandification of them happening across all genres right now. Like I think right now the one that's coming to my head because I just saw it on Tumblr is like Joe Burrow. He's having his moment in the past couple of years because he's an attractive human. And that's, again, through no fault of his own, but like there's a wave of people that are following in a fandom space he's not at that level yet where it's getting weird, but this is the trend that we see where it can get weird. And, like you said, this is just us being a lot older and going through this so many times where we can see and predict these trends happening. I fear we're at a point where we can recognize it, but there's nothing that we can do to stop it. It's almost like,
By any means, no.
yeah, it's like the ball has already been rolling. It's just on a downhill slope and there's nothing that we can do to stop it other than just, I hope people can learn to be respectful.
I think, well, it's on the fandom, but it's also, I think it is on the people that are with it too, of like, and not, again, it's not putting responsibility to, I guess, go back to Pato as an example here, but it can be applied to any of these drivers. I think what I'm worried we will see is that somebody is going to say something that they can't come from. And it's going to be, I think the fallout is going to be a lot different than what we typically see when some sort of like athlete says something really stupid that's like, you shouldn't have said that. And like, it's going to put a disgrace on how people look at you, but it usually doesn't mean that there's some sort of like, typically, it does happen. Like, I mean, take Michael Vick, for example. Like, it does happen of big ramifications, but like, I worry that what we could see is that like, eventually, someone says the wrong thing at the wrong time and off enough of a fan base behind them that they are
Yeah.
forced into retirement, or that a team has to make a move and cut them from a seat, when it's like, as an athlete, they didn't deserve that to be the reaction, but it's what they're having to do from almost like a media perspective. And maybe we're getting too inner what perspective, like,
Introspective.
thank you. I don't know words.
Words are hard.
But yeah, I think it's just, I don't know, maybe we're looking to, and it's me, I'll say it. I'm not going to put that on you and what I'm saying here, but like two of like worst case scenario. But again, it goes back to we've seen this happen, and this is
Yeah.
a very different space than what we've ever seen this happen in before. And it's just
Yeah.
throwing up lots of red flags for me. And I guess to circle back to what we were saying, with it being McLaren specifically, of like we're seeing this happen over and over and over. What happens when it gets to the point that like it is a big level reaction outside of just what's been acceptable for the sport?
Yeah. And I think I'm going to add like a little caveat to this of if someone says something or encourages behavior, absolutely there should be ramifications. We saw it last year with Canapino and right? It was
Yes,
Canapino.
100% yes, and that's why
Yeah,
he's
so
no longer doing.
yeah, so we talked about it last season, but Canapino had incident with Callum Isla in a race. Canapino's fans went crazy, sending death threats to Callum Isla.
Well, and that was 2 years ago when he and Callum were teammates. Last year
Yeah,
it was with Theo Porcher.
Theo Pocher, yes. Yeah, so, it was Canapino kind of not necessarily encouraging it per se, but like he didn't stop it. And that was when fandom space kind of took over and it just went nuts to the point of, again, sending death threats to a driver is absurd behavior. I'm going to put that flat out. It is absurd behavior. You're not a fan if you're sending death threats. What the hell are you doing?
You're also
But
just a bad person. I'm gonna
yeah,
say that as well. You're a bad
yeah,
person.
yes, 100%. And so my caveat to that is the fact that if you say something or encourage it, or even better yet, you don't discourage poor behavior, that's when you should absolutely see ramifications. And that's what happened with Canapino. And he's no longer driving. He's completely irrelevant in the space of IndyCar, rightfully so. However, I worry. I'm going to echo what you said. Like, I worry that a driver is going to say something stupid at the wrong time and it's going to be taken out of context and it's not necessarily going to be like a massive deal in the grand scheme of things. And with the way fandom is, it can snowball. Like I said, the ball can already be rolling and then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what I worry about as well. So this just turned into an episode of fandom discourse.
Racing thoughts. Racing thoughts.
Racing thoughts indeed. We have appropriately named our podcast.
I guess we shelf this until the next time something stupid happens.
Well,
We're almost 31. It's fine.
it's all fine. We know this. There's no shame in this. You can be in fandom spaces even in your 30s.
Sometimes it just looks like guys driving on tracks.
Here we are.
I don't know. That's where all that led to. I don't know.
There's never going to be a resolution for this stuff right now. This is just our thoughts and our takes and, based off of information and things that are currently happening. Who's to say opinions and things won't change in the future? Again, depending on what happens. We don't know, but we're going to continue to talk about it, I'm sure, because this is something that's never going to go away at this point.
Yeah. Current standings following Detroit. This episode will come out on the 9th. I don't know if it's even worth previewing Gateway or not since we've changed formats.
Yeah,
but
probably not.
Our top 10 as it currently stands as of June 3rd at almost 6 p.m. Eastern Time. 10th place, Marcus Armstrong. 9th, Colton Herta. 8th, Scott McLaughlin. 7th, Scott Dixon. 6th, Felix Rosenquist. 5th, Will Power. 4th, Christian Lungar. 3rd, Cal Kirkwood. 2nd, Pato O'Ward. And still leading in everything, he's still inevitable, even when he DNFs, is Alex Palou at 311 points. I will say we did see the gap close quite significantly.
Hey, Pato's only 90 points behind, so
And it
it's
was
not like
202.
he's running
Yeah.
away with it.
he's still up to almost 2 full races.
Yes, but it's closing a gap and it's, what, only 7 races in to the season?
10
We
more to
still have
go.
Yeah, still have 10 more. It's kind of all to play for until it's not. So, I'm trying to be hopeful.
He's gonna wrap it up in Mid-Ohio.
Let me have hope. Let me be delusional. Okay.
All right, we'll be back next time. I think that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's it.
Bye.